Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a link down below and you can click on it. You'll end up in Zoom. You click on that link, you'll end up in Mukana. And in Mukana, you really become a producer. You become one of the people who is actually running this show. I'm a little confused right now because I'm trying to do this announcement and YouTube is not showing any video. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm actually seeing something moving. There we go. So now it's a broken start. It's funny. It seems like YouTube's become less and less stable, and somehow it's kicking us out. So we're almost there. Hopefully, tomorrow or Friday we'll start the stream to move the stream to the next step. So we're close. Kevin's almost done with what he was working on. Anyway, if you have questions, the best thing to do is ask them in Mukana. Vote those questions up and down. If you think you can answer those questions, then come in at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Become part of the panel. If you're not sure if you're ready to be part of the panel, come in at 6, become part of the panel. You can come in, check out your kit, make sure everything's working, and hang out with us. Just talk about all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of a fun way to get ready for the show. First hour is open season. It's whatever you want to talk about around media production, virtual production. All of those things are the things that we talk about. The second hour is something we want to spend a little bit more time on. So we're it's just some vertical. Usually on Monday it's a general thing. Tuesday is audio. Yesterday I thought was amazing. We had a discussion about just tuning versus a well-tempered scale, something that I didn't know much about, and I still just know a little bit about now. But it was really, really fascinating to kind of start to understand how music scales get built and how they interact and how much math there is. So anyways, that was great. Today we're going to talk about fly kits. So how do we take our gear into the world now that some of us are going back to taking our gear into the world. So we're talking about fly kits today. Tomorrow's Ruthless Reviews. So we're going to be looking at everybody's setup again, video, audio, and see how where we can improve our setup. We're getting ready for doing some more high profile events. We've got a pretty high profile guest next week. One of the things that's going to be interesting next week is that Nate will actually be cutting the shows next week as we prep. So we'll start with the panel in the first hour, but when we go into the second hours, it will be a little bit different because we're actually starting to build, much like what you saw with Madeline's show. We'll be building kind of that kind of show throughout next week as we get ready for some stuff that's going to happen the week after. So anyway, so that'll be coming up there for the second hours. Friday we've got AWS, of course, and then Saturday we're going to be doing education. The education one is not going to be streamed. We're kind of getting into some nuts and bolts about some stuff that we'd prefer not to just put on YouTube. So know that you need to be here for that one. Saturday night, of course, or Saturday evening, afternoon is Mad in the Kitchen. That is a place where you can watch us behind the scenes. You can just watch the whole show get built up. It's kind of a very unique opportunity. Starts at 3:00 and the show starts at 5, and then the post show starts at 6:30 when it's finished. So definitely check that out. And now we're going to jump to the questions. JJ McKenna taking over the questions. We've got them in there. So JJ, what do we got first?
Our first question comes from Daniel Goldstein from Washington, D.C. Amazon is buying MGM. Discuss. Note Ari Block asked this much more eloquently.
Oh, let's see if we can find Ari's. I don't see Ari Block. He asked it more eloquently, but I don't see it there. Anyway, so what do people think? Go ahead, Nigel.
I am very concerned that James Bond's accent will change and become West Coast American, which it strikes me as, I don't know what to tell you.
He's going to say, martini? He'll end all of his stuff up there. Maybe with an olive? Anyway, go ahead, John.
The only thought I had on this was I look at the historical spend that Netflix making on production, and I think it was 18 or 19 bill they spent in 2020. Yeah. And I don't know how you compete against that. Their trajectory for production is like that. So everybody's scrambling to catch up, right?
How you compete is you buy existing content. That is a great way that's the old fashioned way of competing is I can just buy things. And so I think that probably Netflix couldn't buy into those things because a lot of those were clients in the past, but I think this could end up with a buying war. We were talking about it in the pre-show. I don't know how many other properties there are to buy. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, so I guess it's just getting they're just getting the library and the distribution arm, but MGM hasn't produced a whole lot lately. So, Amazon produces far more stuff than MGM has ever produced. So I'm not sure.
Well, it's the back
distribution arm in the back, in the back catalog of all those musicals and things. Some people said it was a political thing that Bezos bought it because MGM owns all the outtakes to The Apprentice. And he would air some of those.
Well, he's the one person that has the money to dig into that pretty hard. Liberty?
Yeah, to Courtney's point, I think it's actually a good move. I think MGM will probably come out on top with this because of all of the IP that they have. Well, yeah, and Amazon because of the distribution side of things. But I think it'll be a good move for them. And audience-wise, if you think of who's shopping on Amazon and Amazon Prime growing, that actually it's going to be a win-win.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's just we're watching this in every industry. You see a scramble. Like there's a scramble where everyone knows where this is going to go. So the railroads, the internet, all these things. And then you end up with a few leaders. And I think that Amazon's a little behind. They got in early enough to be a leader. They just didn't execute very well. And so now they're going to have to really turn hard to make it work. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And it doesn't mean you won't see an MGM movie on another service like Netflix or anything like that. It's just like Disney will never show Deadpool, so it's got to play somewhere.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think that we are going to see a lot of vertical integration where they're not showing their content anywhere else. Like that companies are going to start doing more and more of that, unless you're paying for it, unless you buy that thing from, on iTunes or whatever. You're not going to be able to. I think most of the subscription services are not, because the subscription service is a much better model than an exclusive subscription service is a much better model than all the other models. That's why everyone's playing so hard for this, is that, releasing movies is a risky business. Subscription models are not a risky business. So, and we have to remember that, we love to think of artists in Hollywood, but it's run by banks. People, and so banks that are sometimes called studios, but they're just trying to leverage, and mitigate their risk. And the low risk way to do this is a large subscription service if you can get enough people. That's why you're going to see more and more of these titles. I mean, I don't think that movies are going away, but it doesn't make, the other thing you get with MGM is all those content. Like, for instance, James Bond is coming out as a movie every 2 years or whatever. What if it was a TV show? But a really high quality one that was happening all the time. But I'm saying that we're seeing offshoots with Star Wars and with many other things, with Avengers. You're going to see more and more of those offshoots because that keeps people in subscription. Otherwise, they drop. I thought I'd drop Disney. I was like, I'll watch Mandalorian. Now they have Mandalorian, and then there was WandaVision, and then there was Winter Soldier, and then there was, all these. They just keep on adding those up, and that's much more valuable to the brand than that's a much more valuable business model than film. Than releasing to a traditional distribution. And that's going to be in the long term. I think we'll still see big films that are released in theaters, but I think the demand for screens is going to go. The numbers I'm hearing are 80% drop in demand for screens in the next 10 years. Courtney?
Yeah, and you're right. Disney has been pulling their stuff off of other streaming services for the past 2 years or so that they can force people onto Disney Plus. But and I think you're going to see more of that, of the individual production studios that have started streaming services like Paramount Plus and HBO Plus and Plus. They're all going to be pulling back their collection of rights and titles to their own streaming service to try and force you onto their.
Well, and also the trend is really series. That a series of 6 or 8 lets you develop the characters a lot more deeply. Set you up for possible, just continuing the series. It's not a sequel. It's much lower risk for them to build lots of new content. And the reality is, for creators, a subscription service is way better for us because it means that they're more likely to take risk because we're just in a bucket of stuff where the numbers aren't, you're not failing horribly in public. You're just, the numbers are much more quiet. So it's actually a pretty good deal for a lot of creators. The hard part is figuring out the royalties, which still tricky, you know, as far as that goes. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes from Ken Jordan here in the panel. It provides a link. After you watch this 1964 2-minute video on Arthur C. Clarke predicting virtual meetings, was he a visionary or a time traveler?
That's good. This is so good that I think we're going to actually. I watched this ahead of time, seeing the questions, and we're going to watch this. I think we're just gonna watch the thing. So just give me a second here. Let me share this. It's worth the 2 minutes. It's not very long, and you got to see what he said 60 some years ago. Hold on. Is it showing it there? There we go.
But what about the city of the day after tomorrow, say the year 2000? I think it will be completely different. In fact, it may not even exist at all. Oh, I'm not thinking of the atom bomb and the next Stone Age. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough which has been made possible by developments in communications, particularly the transistor and, above all, the communications satellite. These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we don't know their actual physical location. It will be possible in that age, perhaps only 50 years from now, for a man to conduct his business from Tahiti or Bali just as well as he could from London. In fact, if it proves worthwhile, almost any executive skill, any administrative skill, even any physical skill, could be made independent of distance. I am perfectly serious when I suggest that one day we may have brain surgeons in Edinburgh operating on patients in New Zealand. When that time comes, the whole world will have shrunk to a point, and the traditional role of the city as a meeting place for man would have ceased to make any sense. In fact, men will no longer commute, they will communicate. They won't have to travel for business anymore, they'll only travel for pleasure. I only hope that when that day comes, and when the city is abolished, the whole world isn't turned into one giant suburb.
He does not like suburbs, does he?
And the first thing we need to invent is the blimped film camera.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Chris.
I think when when he speaks and you look at his face very much exhibits some of the side effects of time travel. I would say definitely a time traveler.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty amazing though to say that. I mean, that's probably where it seems like we're going that direction pretty fast. Go
filmed
ahead,
Chris. Filmed in 64. He said perhaps 50 years in the future. When did Zoom start? 2014. That would be 50-year delta.
I think Zoom's a little earlier than that, but yeah, he's hitting it pretty close to he hit it pretty close to right on as far as that goes. Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I don't want to be the downer here, but there's a line, I think it's from the Jurassic Park, where the scientist asked the question, you got to ask yourself not only, but can we, but should we? And I think we also have to look at that's a pure science fiction view of the world, and that there are some downsides to this environment as well, and we've got to work out how to balance those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a cost to everything, and you have to decide whether you're willing to pay it, I think, and also what the cost is compared to other things. I think that the idea of giving people more freedom, what we're seeing right now is a lot of people have more freedom to live where they want to live or to be more costly. One of the big problems with, I guess I retweeted something yesterday. The stats on the mobility in the United States is stunning. And I mean, just unbelievable thread that I forwarded or retweeted or whatever yesterday. And a lot of it is that, people are just when they don't have to be in the city, or they don't have to be in an urban area, or they don't have to be in the Bay Area, they're leaving. And they're not necessarily leaving California, but they're leaving that space because. And then one of the big reasons people aren't going back is because they're selling their house for enough that we have people in this group. I'm not going to point them out, but they've already said that they're selling their house, in New York or in California, and they're just going to take a year off because they sold their house for so much and they were able to buy another house again, like they said in Idaho, a Californian can pay triple the average price and still it would be affordable, for them, and so there's this huge shift, that's going on. And then you see all the stuff that's going on around people not willing to commute. The commute is now, I've had a couple people go, "Oh, let's meet in person." I'm like, do we have to? Do we have to do that? Like, what about this meeting requires us to be in the same room? I'm very much like, because I now pack my day so tightly between meetings. I have like a minute between meetings, not 15 minutes to drive in or 20 minutes to get somewhere or whatever. I'm like, I go from one part of the world to another, and I do it instantly. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, one of the pieces of property I looked at in Texas had, between December of 2020 and now, had over doubled in price, and still, I'm gonna just take a guess, Alex. You could probably sell your house and buy 4 of these.
Right. Yeah.
And it's 12 acres of land, barn, in-law house in the back, 4-bedroom home, beautiful place.
I mean, the big thing that needs to
your
get
own
solved.
lake.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing that needs to be solved is internet. That's the big thing, is for people to be able to move out and I think that some islands have gotten really good at this. Mauritius has spent a lot of time and money on high-speed connections. And then there's a handful of other countries that have realized that it's really important to have fast. Rwanda, they have a little problem with the final the final mile, but they spent into this early because they knew that it was going to be a big deal. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I think the flywheel has really just started on that future and around like automotive travel, right? With automotive cars being taken over by AI and stuff, Tesla specifically, like that whole transition with cheaper costs, it's like 76 cents right now per mile on average. Once that comes down to 10 or 7 cents a mile, like how different the world's going to be.
Or whether people want, but the hard part they have is whether people want to travel at all. Or whether they're going to. And the opportunity there is, and the reason we're talking about it in the show in so much detail is because it's going to greatly affect our business, for what we do when it comes to virtual events, when it comes to media production, when it comes to all these things. People, in Zoom production, us being in meetings, and why it's important for us to look good and sound good and everything else, because this is the new office place, and this is, and what you're going to see again for physical events is, as people move away from those city centers, those airports get farther away, the commute, the process, everything else, people settled and not used to driving much. All that stuff greatly affects people's willingness to go to physical events, and there's still people that are going to go do it. But the question isn't, it doesn't have to drop to 0 for these events not to make sense anymore. It has to drop by 15%. Like it's like, if just a small group of people decide they don't want to do this anymore, the numbers stop adding up pretty quickly. And that's the thing we have to look at, is it doesn't require everyone or even a half to decide they don't want to go to one of these events before it stops becoming sustainable. And so it's 15, 20, 30% of the people stop going to a convention. Convention doesn't make sense anymore. Go ahead, Courtney.
I think that, however, there's going to be a boomerang reaction. There's already been shown to be, for the places that have opened up again for full occupancy, they've been sold out. All the Broadway shows that are now taking tickets are sold out. So I think because people have been cooped up for a year and a half, there's the need to get out of the house. And so I think there's going to be a big blip of people going to live events in the next year or so. Whether it'll drop back after that, the thrill is gone. We don't know.
Right, exactly. But even that blip, I mean, we're hearing hiccups of those blips, but what we're seeing is a huge push away from that. Like there's this giant movement pulling out. You're definitely seeing blips of things that people are doing in Broadway or whatever, but there's just millions of people that moved out of the cities. And so they're, like that's overshadowing all of that. And again, it's going to positively affect what we do if we're ready for it. Next
You
question.
may be right for work. For leisure, though, I think it's going to go the other way for a while.
It could. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Next question.
Scott Mueller from Clinton Corners, New York asks, I added an A10 Mini to my Extreme Pro ISO setup and noticed the HDMI out on the A10 Mini only works on my display if it's set to 1080 60 frames per second. The Extreme ISO HDMI out works on the same display at 1080 30 frames per second. Is this an issue with the A10 Mini or the display?
Go ahead, Chris.
Just as a point of data, I bought a very thin, very convenient display that I was hoping to use with my A10 ISO. Didn't work at all. I tried. I don't have a lot of various sources here to test it with, so I put it down. I'm going to try it with the Extreme ISO. Maybe it just doesn't have as robust of an output chip to look at various outputs that it may or may not be able to send a signal to.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
A lot of displays I find cannot accept 60 progressive. They'll do 60 interlaced, but they won't do 60 progressive, or they will do 30, which is basically 60 progressive. Interlaced, 60 interlaced.
Yeah, and it could be a 2997 to 30 problem too. One of them's outputting, so you want to look at those fine changes there, because a lot of times they may see 30 but not 2997 or vice versa. So that's another thing to look at as well. Next question.
Johnny S. Diaz from Manila asks, a few episodes ago, I remember Alex mentioned he intended to buy an 8x8 HDMI matrix. Can he tell us which specific model he was referring to?
The one that I'm looking at is the Blackbird 4K HDMI 8x8 18G 4K 60 hertz Y CBCR 444. That's the one that I don't know what it's under the video matrices right now. It's on sale for $849. I'll probably get it this week or next week. No, I just need something to route low latency routing between stuff, and I don't want to convert things to SDI and finding matrices, and I want a matrix so that I can say this goes to these three outputs or this goes to this output, and or even just being I got to double up some of these things, and I haven't been able to figure that out. Go ahead, Courtney.
Does it have a static EDID so that when
does.
you're changing inputs, it doesn't try and renegotiate?
It actually says in the next thing, EDID, IR, RS232. So I think that I can actually control it remotely. So it seems like a pretty beefy box. And so I've just needed to, I need that because I have some outputs that I want to send to my ATEM, and but I also need to send them to monitors so that I can see them. And I want to be able to do both of those seamlessly. And I haven't been able to find another good way to do that. So we're going to try that. Of course, I wish that someone made a 40x40 matrix, HDMI matrix. In my office, I'm trying to kind of go into this kind of HDMI world and try to stay there as much as I possibly can. But we'll see how successful that is. All right, JJ, next question.
JHB from New York. Is there any setting in YouTube to manage someone else's YouTube channel and upload video to it without logging in as that person? Thanks.
Jeffrey's
yes,
nodding.
there is.
Yeah, you have to have it as a business account, right? I mean, you have to have it as a page, not a personal account. You can have someone manage it. Jeffrey's managing mine, but he can't start live events. That's one of the problems. And so you can manage somebody's as I always forget which ones are manager, right? They're calling this like Facebook is an editor, YouTube's a manager. You can manage those, but you need a page that's designed to be managed to be able to have somebody else start and affect live events. That's one of the problems. Go ahead, JJ.
Yeah, I would emphasize that distinction, brand. It has to be a brand account because otherwise, you said it, but just emphasize that. Otherwise, just sharing it, creating an editor account, you cannot do a live event. Can't start a live event, can't anything.
Right. Yeah, so that's the, but you can definitely do it. In fact, that's the way we've moved to doing almost everything. When it first started, you had to log in as the person, and we just don't want to deal with people's passwords. The problem with losing passwords isn't so much they change them later. Anybody who knows what they're doing can look at patterns. They can see how someone builds a password, and then they go, oh, they replace this with this, or they do this with this, and that's the kind of thing you don't want to show people. So it's not just even if it was invalidated, it's the thought process behind it that someone that might want to leverage it is using. Next question.
Aaron Huslage asks from Durham, North Carolina. How often do you re-edit things that you've live streamed?
At this point, I would say a very small percentage, but when we're doing it for clients, a very high percentage. Go ahead, Liberty.
Yeah, so our workflow, like you said, is we do the live and then essentially parsing it up for either social media. Do they need elements for case studies? And so that's where that post-production process would come in for us.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, same thing here. If it's a live event or something like that, usually I don't, unless somebody does something like throw out an expletive and I need to cut that out for the show. And then I'll just usually, in YouTube's case, I'll just usually edit it in YouTube. If I'm working with doing the Amazon Live thing and posting on Amazon, there's a ton of stuff I got to cut out. I can't talk about other websites. I can't, this or that or the other thing. We got to keep it in the infrastructure. So a lot of editing happens there.
Go ahead, Hosmer.
Yeah, for the medical event, we had the pre-recorded videos before the event, but post-event, we did a post-production on the live event, edited that and put it up on the learning platform so that the attendees could go through that again.
Yeah, definitely being able to cut them up. I think that one of the challenges that I'm kind of wrestling with is the fact that a live event that's really conversational is not as listenable. It's not as bite-sized. It's hard to take this, for instance, and make it bite-sized, although I think we can start eventually breaking them up into questions and so on and so forth. But conversation is a little harder when you're not part of it. So I think that's the challenge when we look at it. Something good live, like football is great to watch while you're watching the game, but very few people watch the game again. You kind of already knew what happened. Go ahead, JJ.
I would say that's one of the strengths of Mukana, though, is that if I want to watch something later on, if I want to reference something later on, I can click on that. And it jumps me to the point in the conversation where we had that one element.
Yeah. I mean, that's where yeah, absolutely. All right, Jeffrey?
Football's been doing this really interesting thing where the next day they'll actually post, they'll replay the game, but they'll take out a lot of
I love it.
the dead space. And it's just,
if I haven't seen it,
easier to watch. Yeah.
I haven't seen it. It's good to kind of catch up with all the plays. The problem is that one of the things that makes American football really fun to watch is all the commentary. It's the contextual conversation that goes around it. It's the Tony Romo telling you what he thinks is going to happen next and the explanation. And most sports don't do that. They don't provide enough time for context. And so they're very hard to, you can't dig into them as deeply oftentimes. Nigel?
Yeah, I don't understand football, but I have learned baseball, and I think MLB have always done a really good job. And one of the things they now have is catch up. So if you join a game on the MLB stream mid game, join the stream mid game, it'll catch you up on the highlights and then bring you live. And I think that's a smart approach.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Brian Carpenter asks from Cleveland, do any of the panelists have their kit control simplified?
This one, we're going to put this one back because it's a kit question. Make sure to try to tag your stuff as first hour or kit for the question. So let's go to the next question.
Our friend Hasmukh Kachar from Cape Town, South Africa. In choosing pores in BMPCC, thank you.
ProRes. Yeah, go ahead.
Pores. What does 422 mean? Please give a rookie guide.
So basically, what 422. What we have here is that back when we started doing color TV, we had black and white, and then we realized, we got to add color to it. We didn't have enough bandwidth to add the same amount of data for the color as we did with the black and white. So what we have is YUV or some version of that, and essentially we figured out that you can actually look at a picture and have a lot less color data because we'll think that it's sharp just by the black and white data. So the black and white data has to be full resolution, but the color resolution can be much lower and it'll still work when you're looking at it. So So when you see 444 or 422 or 41 or 420 or 411, old DV used to be 411. What that meant is for every 4 pixels of black and white information, there's 1 pixel of color, like literally just stretched over it. And it doesn't sound like it should work, but it absolutely does. And I have a picture of it somewhere. I have a sample of it in Photoshop, but you literally, if you take that color and you squeeze it up and you pull it back out from a low res to a high res, it'll still look just like the photo. The one place that that falls down is when you are trying to key something. So because you're now keying green, the color, and you have half the resolution. So 4422 means that you have half the resolution, and you'll see stair stepping in your key if you look really closely along those edges, because it didn't have enough resolution for every pixel that's there, in the image. And so 422, so usually when we're keying something, we want 444 because we want the same number of pixels of color as we have with the number of black and white ones. And so that's what we're that's why we have 444. Now, there's a couple other things that happen in ProRes. 422 is 8-bit. That means that there's 8 bits per channel. And what that means, I was just describing this to someone else yesterday. 1 bit is 2 colors. So all bits are 2, right? Off on, off on, off on, off on, off on. So 1 bit is 2. 1 bit is 2 colors, black or white. 2 bits is 4. 3 bits is 8. 4 bits is 16. 5 bits is 32. 6 bits is 64. 7 bits is 128, and 8 bits is 256, because it doubles the number of options every single time. That's how you end up with 256 levels of gray for each channel, RGB. And so we have 256 levels, and that's all we have. When you see banding in your image, like you do a gradient in Photoshop in 8-bit, you're going to see the stair stepping that goes out. That's because the number of pixels crossed is longer than the number of gray areas that it dropped from one to the next. So a really soft gradient, that stair step means that I don't have any more colors to represent that until I get to here, and then I had to go down. So it's all I have. It's all the pixels I have to describe that gradient. And so that's why we see stair stepping. And so 422 is 8-bit. 422HQ is 10-bit. So we go from 256 to 512 to 1024. So now 10-bit is 10. Now I have 4 times as many pixels to describe that gradient or describe soft transitions as I had before. 444XQ in ProRes is 12-bit. So now I have 4,096 levels of gray for every channel, for red, green, and blue. Now I've got a ton of data that I can, now I've got a ton of pixels to describe the transition from here to here. And that's going to give me, that depth means that I don't get banding when I stretch it out, because what you need that for typically is not so much in a regular SDR, but when we go to HDR, when we go to PQ, when we go to HLG, and primarily when we go to Vision, we're going from this tiny shallow pool of 100 nits in SDR to a really deep pool of 4,000 nits. So we're taking that image and we're stretching it way up, and we need enough pixels to get from one place to the other in the color data to make that work. And that's why the higher bit rates are more important. It also means that when we make any kind of color correction, we have more data to work with. There's more there to throw away and keep and everything else in those higher bit rates. And so that's what the 422 and 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit means. Go ahead, Hosmuk, and then Courtney.
Yeah, it's the more you know, the less you know. And at my age, I don't think I got enough years left to learn all the things I really want to learn.
Well, we'll talk about it.
I don't like to somebody tell me just press this button and just choose photo. I need to know why and what does it mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can then start to think about it. You can come up with unique solutions, and understand when you understand it, then you're able to make new decisions, related to what's there. And so it's important. And my goal working with you actually is to illustrate a lot of these things, so we go through that description I just gave, and then we'll figure out a way to have people animate things.
Don't worry, my team knows a lot more than I do.
No, what we need to do is we have to have people, both people who understand it, as well as people who are going to look at it and go, well, you missed a step here. Like, I don't understand how to get from M to O. Go ahead, Courtney.
Your description was very good, Alex, except for one thing was a little confusing what you said. You said you have a ton more pixels. It's actually the number of pixels doesn't change. It's a ton more values per pixel.
That's right. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, it's not pixels. Yeah, I'm thinking of them as steps, but you're absolutely right. There's no more pixels. There's just more values of those pixels. It's a good, very good correction. Next question.
I'm not sure if this next one is a kit one as well, but Mark Horner from Seattle, Washington, on a recent educator segment, Alex was asked what live stream gear he'd purchased with a $10 budget for his school. He included two Blackmagic PC 6K cameras.
I think it was a 10K budget. Yeah, exactly. 10K budget. It's in the notes down below. What specifically makes the
what specifically makes the BPC 6K camera a good choice for live streaming? Thank you.
It's not so much for live streaming as it is for integrating with the rest of what you're doing. So, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the reason to go for the 6K rather than the 4K is it's a larger sensor. So in low light conditions, the 6K is better in low light because it's got a larger sensor. That's one of the key differences between that and the 4K.
And the reason that the Blackmagic pipeline makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, is because they're all integrated together. There's two things about them. One is that the switcher, is able to have an enormous amount of control on the cameras. Number two is that there's an open API. So, for instance, right now, let's see if I can do this without doing too much damage. See how my color's changing? It's blinking a little bit because I'm kind of playing with it here, but. The switcher and the camera and my controller are disagreeing. But the point is what I'm doing here is I'm actually affecting the camera from an iPad, from an app. And what's really great is there's like 4 different apps that talk to my camera, from the iPad. And you know why? It's because there's an open API. So Blackmagic said, we're going to let you run our hardware any way you'd like. And so we're seeing, like, one of the things that we're doing, we're going to start using MixFX Pro because they're able to build an incredible piece of software that sits on top of the hardware. And so what has changed with Blackmagic right now is the market size. So what happened with the Mini at $300, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm going to bet that they sold over 100,000 units of those. That makes it the most common switcher in the world, and it finally reaches critical mass for people to start developing for. Now, MixFX Pro and Here to Record with John Barker and all these folks suddenly have a market that's big enough to support them, and they can sell into if only a small percentage buy it. And so that is that ecosystem now we're just starting to see the beginning of. And that's something that you're not going to get with almost any other piece of software or hardware switcher is that ecosystem. And the fact that ewcosystem draws all the way up into the cameras and into the routers and into the playback. And we have, Jonas doing play out B, and all those things are because there's an architecture that can be used there to do that. And Sony doesn't do that, and Grass Valley doesn't do that, and Canon doesn't do that. And, so you're ending up with all these mixed, very simple ways of looking at it. And so that's why I lean towards Blackmagic, is specifically because we can customize all of those things. We're going to be building tools over the summer to run this show where theoretically you could be multi-pinning inside of Zoom and it will be running it will run super sources inside of the ATEM, or even in Mukana, we can select who's going to answer the question, and all of that's going to drive things in the switcher. I couldn't do that with anything else. So when we talk about building that kind of integration of really being able to build the next generation of conversational content, that I don't see how I could do that on any other platform. And so that's why I lean towards Blackmagic. Once you buy a Blackmagic switcher, buying other things just kind of hobbles you. So buying a different kind of camera means that I can't control it, and I can't shade it and check focus, and I've literally shaded a camera 3,000 miles away, because I needed to. And that's something that And I did that 5 years ago. Like it's been around for a long time. It's just that now the market's much bigger. So that's why I tend to lean towards Blackmagic. And once I go to Blackmagic, I tend to lean towards all of their hardware is because of the integration. And that's what nobody else has. And I think that they'll continue to, they'll go as fast as they can. The Blackmagic's biggest advantage is they have one person making a decision. And their biggest liability is they have one person making the decisions. So that's the, same thing that happened with Apple for a while. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the whole collection of information that came from all of you. And I've heard you go on about the open API, and I've actually repeated that to friends and even my wife. And that's because that's really exciting, and you're not stuck with something. You've talked about, Nutex options and Wirecast and the others where you're kind of stuck with what they have and it doesn't evolve. And I'm here to record. I've seen what's going on there, watched that episode. So that's all very exciting. I had a friend who does a lot of live streaming ask me, why the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K for live streaming? Why? And I realized I didn't really have the best ammunition coming back because I was so enthused about this product, but I wasn't thoroughly convinced. I didn't have the knowledge that was just shared all at once here. So thank you all very much. The sensor issue is a really good one too.
Yeah, and short depth of field is nice. Yeah. And there's other things. There's other cameras with short depth of field. It's just that they you can't control them from the switcher, and you can't shade them from the switcher, and you can't load LUTs, or you can't do all those things. And the fact that it's relatively inexpensive to do all those things. When you say under $10,000, I'm like, well, if you said under $1 million, I might tell you to go buy some Arri cameras. But I'd probably they look great. But I'd probably stick with the Blackmagic. So I just get 12Ks. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, just a minor note that if you're in the ATEM mini world, then that pocket camera is the best fit. But when you move up to like SDI models with the Blackmagic ecosystem, you're not going to get that same control over HDMI yet.
Yeah, I will admit that I'm having a little bit of trouble controlling this camera. I'm testing the 12K right now, and I'm having a little trouble getting the 12K and the Extreme to talk to each other completely. Like some of the tools are there and some of them aren't. And I'm using the converter, the HDMI to SDI, and like it can see the camera and it's talking to the camera, but the camera's not listening to everything it's getting. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there somewhere. Go ahead, JJ, next question.
Frank Cullen from Berkeley, California.
Frank.
I'm looking for recommendation.
Sorry, I know Frank. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm looking for recommendations for a virtual conference platform, 500 attendees, register online, and keep email addresses and other info as needed. They want to be able to set up 4 to 6 exhibitors, sponsors, and have 4 to 6 sessions with breakout sessions. The format is probably going to be a webinar.
That seems to me as a right down the middle Zoom webinar or a Zoom meeting, maybe. It might probably be a Zoom meeting. So the way that I would think about that process is when they set up registration, you're going to get all that information. So you're going to be able to gather their emails and their contact information and everything else that's there. You'll be able to control access through that process. I would put the exhibitors into breakout rooms. So give exhibitors their own breakout rooms that attendees can just go to in the in-between sessions and talk to those exhibitors. And then in addition to that, I would have other breakout rooms that are the sessions for now, you have 4 to 6 sessions with breakout sessions. And so where that starts to get interesting is where you start to need, Obvio is something that you might want to start thinking about related to that as they help manage Zoom so that you can do all those things. But you getting, those breakout rooms, and it depends on how many. Like, do you want people to break into groups of 2, groups of 5, groups of 10? All of that's possible, but it then starts to take a little bit of code to get that to work. But I still think Zoom would be the best platform, Nigel.
Sorry, I hit the button twice. Sorry, this is more of a sort of stupid 101 question. The big difference between a Zoom room and a Zoom webinar, is it breakout rooms? Is that the big difference?
Currently, the webinars are not able to do breakout rooms. And so right now, the webinars aren't built that way. At some point in time in the past, webinar and meetings forked. And meetings have the infrastructure. Meetings are basically creating another Zoom event that's bundled into the Zoom event. And so it's another Zoom room or another. It's a Zoom event bundled into the first Zoom event, and that's all it is. The problem is that the way that the registration process works inside a webinar doesn't allow it to do that twice. And so I think the understanding I have is there has had to be a lot of re-gearing. They are promising to give us breakout rooms in webinar. They talked about it in last Zoomtopia. So we expect it someday, probably before the next Zoomtopia. So we're probably getting closer, because you always know when people announce things at one event that there's a high probability it'll be done, or at least released in some rough version by the next event, because they don't want to explain it to people why they didn't get it done. Go ahead, JJ. Yes.
There was a new model offered or announced the other day, was with Zoom Events, which I think it's also
I think they said it's
supposedly gonna be its
coming.
own platform type. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's coming. I'm going to guess that Zoom Events is where the webinar with breakout rooms is going. I think that's what they're going to call it, and it's probably going to have a lot of other features. And so this is a very fast-moving train, of how virtual events get done, because they're going to become the premier platform for events within the next 5 years. And so there's a lot of people spending a lot of money on it, and right now the two leaders are Microsoft and Zoom. There's a lot of goofy ones that we've looked at. We just haven't found anyone that didn't feel like it was more goofy than useful. So next question.
Gabriele Lo Surdo from Milan, Italy. On my Mac Mini M1, it appears that Zoom Rooms does not see either the ATM Mini or the NDI virtual input software as a webcam. Is that a known issue? Given that, how would you bring the program video into the room for the connected panelist?
I think there has been some issues with NDI. We absolutely use the ATEMs with the M1s all the time. So I'm not sure what about that connection isn't working. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would recommend just take a look at the security and privacy settings and system preferences, and make sure that the Zoom Room client has the proper permissions for it to access cameras.
Yeah, because it should work, because we've definitely done that. Next question.
Carmi Weinsweig from Redondo Beach, here, California. What iOS, iPad OS apps now have versions that run on Apple Silicon Mac systems are people most happy about?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, the apps that I use to control my lights, them being on the being able to run on the M1 is really useful when you just have the a Mac running, and then just being able to control and adjust the lights from that, rather than the apps itself, rather than on the iPad or on the iPhone.
The two that we've used the most are I think the Blackmagic control software for the camera, as well as the Wingman from Sound Devices. Both we're using on the M1, and those have been the most useful for us, as far as doing that. But has anyone tried the MixFX Pro on an M1? Do we know if that works? I was going to test it and buy some more, but now I'm not sure. That there's rumors now that there's an M1X Mac Mini coming in a couple weeks, and so I started freezing, froze movement. Like, okay, don't buy anything. All right, next question.
Gabriele Lo Surdo, again from Milan, Italy. I'm experiencing a problem using the Dante Avio USB-C with a Mac Mini M1. When connected to the Avio USB-C, the Mac Mini does not detect the second monitor, also USB-C. If I disconnect the Avio USB-C, the Mac Mini detects the second monitor. Is anyone else having the same issue? Note, here's a video showing the problem, and there's a link attached.
I'm wondering if you are pushing that through some kind of hub. Like, that's what it sounds like I don't understand how it's connected to the monitor. You'll have an HDMI out, and you'll have two USB-C out of that, and you need to not have the monitor and the Avio share the same USB-C connection. I don't think that will work. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, he's saying it's a Mac Mini M1.
That's
you
what
can only have, the USB-C can only control one monitor. The second monitor can only then work on HDMI from the M1.
But what I'm wondering is if somehow he has the USB-C in some kind of hub or split, it would be like a USB-C to HDMI, and then also another USB-C. And if you have that in the same hub, they could disrupt each other. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, in the previous question as well, he was having a problem with detecting the ATEM Mini as well over USB. So I'm wondering whether he has a fault with his USB-C on the hardware side itself, potentially, or something else messing with the USB detection. Because if he's seeing it with multiple USB devices, it could be something else.
Yeah, it's And did we see? Are you looking at that, Jeffrey? Is it plugged into a hub of any kind?
I'm trying to decipher how it's working, so I'll play it once. Start from the beginning. And I'm buffering.
Okay. All right. We'll try to come back to that one. It's a good question. I'm glad you sent the video, but we got to figure out a good way to send those. Next question.
Hasmukh Gachar asks from Cape Town, in preparation from the Ruthless Review, I am a little confused. Webcams in OH have been Huddle or Brio. Not sure if I should set up the 6K. Will I need the OH LUTs or just stick to what I know?
Happy to send you the OH LUTs. So I'm using one right now. It appears that those LUTs have changed, or the color science has changed in the 6Ks into the 5th generation, and I think that that's why some people have had trouble with the LUTs that I sent. In fact, we should send one to Nigel and see if it works as a test. Anyway, so but I think we'll find out if Charles is ready for it to be more publicly shared. What I really want to do is get Charles. I've talked to Charles about having him on for a second hour to have him show what he does, so he can give us some more fish. But what we need to do is have him teach us how to fish, a little bit. So we'll work on that. But I would go with the 6K if you got it, and contact me offline and we'll figure it out. All right, next question.
Gualberto from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Any way, or if it is even possible, to replace Wirecast vMix with an affordable fill and key solution on the ATEM TV HD? I'm guessing it would need to be controlled by the ATEM also.
I don't know what is affordable, I guess is the thing. Noah?
Yeah, there's a hyperdrive recorders that can play an alpha and a video channel. So depending on what your elements are that you're trying to play back, those can work as well.
Mito, MITTO, I think it's MITTO is relatively inexpensive and will do a key fill output from a computer. So that might be another option. Given that you're on, you're talking about Wirecast and vMix, I'm assuming you have a PC. So I don't know. I think, is Mito cross-platform? Actually, I'm not sure if it's cross-platform or not. But that might be another option. Yes, Mickey?
Sorry, did you mean MITI?
MITI, I'm sorry. Mito is a small little box that we use for other things. So MIDI is what I meant. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Chris Fenwick from the panel. Sacramento, NAB projections and thoughts about 2019 versus 2021 versus 2022 participation. What do y'all think?
I don't know what's going to happen in the fall. Almost everybody who has a degree in virology says that we're going to see a spike, in October. So it seems like they've once again moved it into a place of unsafeness, and either they'll keep on doing it and be a massive spreader, or they'll, or maybe nothing will happen. Maybe we'll actually get to the point where that works out. But I think they're running up against a lot, right now in that area. I think that, over the next couple of years, I don't think we're going to have events like that in 10 years, but I don't know about the next couple of years. We'll try. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, one thing to look at maybe would be to estimate on how it's going to be for this year's convention is to look at the exhibitor list and see if the exhibitor list compared to previous years pre-pandemic is shrunken considerably or not. But I know a lot of manufacturers had in their budgets for a booth in 2021 and 2020, and so now they have that cash, they can afford it, so they might go ahead and just do it. So
all my work this year, almost not this year definitely, but all of my work over the last, or 70% of my work over the last 2 years or year and a half has been those booth budgets. So doing virtual events.
So if they don't show up at NAB, it's Alex's fault.
Yeah, exactly. Those booth budgets have been really good because they were already line itemed in. And so there was no we have to do something new. It's like, oh, what do we do? We already have this money. And so that's been a huge benefit to us. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, there's clearly a pent-up demand in some people's minds to attend things like NAB, CDS, stuff like that. Those of us who are scheduling to go to something like CDS don't really know what we're going to see when we get there. And so we may be reticent to send lots of people not knowing what the experience is going to be, which will send the negative message that this wasn't worth doing, which will cause a ripple to happen.
I mean, the investment is so heavy. I mean, you have to remember that, like, you go to a booth, like an Intel booth or some kind of booth or a Sony booth, you're talking about $10 million. You can do a lot with $10 million online. Like it's spent efficiently. You can build a TV show that 24/7 about Sony instead of a booth. And the question is, would you get a larger impact, deeper and wider than you do at the booth? I think there's a that's the thing people are going to be challenged with. Go ahead, Noah, and then John.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see too, when people go to NAB like in person, if they're going to have the reaction of like, oh, this is weird and foreign to me now, like I don't want to do this anymore, and then later on they'll just stop going to events or not go at all.
Again, I think part of the problem is that people are now no longer living in the cities they were living in, and they're not used to travel, and they're not used to all those things. And now it's harder when you're in Oklahoma or you're in outside of somewhere else. You now have connections and things, and it's just the friction is higher to do that, and you're used to seeing a lot more content. It also has to do with not necessarily us, but organizations like our own that are diving deeper and deeper into the technical things that you would normally have at a conference. If you can get that from the comfort of your own home without doing it, then it changes the math. John?
Chris just popped back in. Chris, we're on your question right now.
Yeah, see? There we go. What do you
I
think,
had to
Chris?
go out into that real world. Yeah, it was interesting. I was on Jeff Greenberg's, he has a Clubhouse chat that he does with Scott Simmons, and they were talking about this, and they've bought themselves a year of fiddling with the numbers, because if they do NAB in October, apparently it's completely undersold. Like they haven't even opened the South Hall.
Yeah.
And when they do NAB again in April 2022, they'll say, well, the numbers are low. They're obviously going to be low this year. They'll say, well, the numbers are low because everybody was just here a couple months ago.
Right.
And I just think exactly what you think. People just need to learn how to do.
I mean, if you think about, you take that $8
Silly.
million that someone's going to spend on a booth, or even a small 20 by 20 booth is still $150,000 of investment, to go to NAB. Like that's it's one of the little booths, right? Spend $50,000 on hardware to make a great little studio for your company. Hire someone in, let's say your company's not in LA or New York. It's just one of these production companies. It turns out there's a lot of them in Wisconsin. So let's just say Wisconsin, hire someone that's going to manage that for $60,000, $70,000 a year or $80,000 a year. That's going to manage that conversation. And in that same cost, and think of all the other booths that you're not going to. So you might have more than that, $300,000 or $500,000 if you went to IBC and NAB and a couple other ones. And then have conversations around your product, around your industry, not your product, but your industry. That's what people make mistakes about. They want to make content about their product. And what people want is content around the things that they're interested in. And you get into that, and I don't know. I mean, I don't understand how you get more out of it going to the show. Okay, we'll go around this pretty quickly, and then we're going to have to speed up because we're going to go over a little bit, but we'll be okay. Nigel, and then Mark, and then Courtney.
Yeah, don't underestimate the ego of the owners of some of these large companies that like to show up big, and that will attenuate over time. It's still going to be there. They want to show up big
until there's nobody there, and then they'll go, wait, this is a big waste of money. Like they also don't want to be the last sucker. So if they go to an empty space, it becomes like, oh, we shouldn't do. Like I can tell you, there are people who have gone to empty booths. If they see that they spent all that money, and the ego boomerangs the other direction. I spent a bunch of money and there's no one in my booth, is embarrassing, and then they just go the other way. Go ahead, Mark, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I just found it a bit interesting, perhaps telling a coworker was telling me yesterday she's been selected to speak at about testing for digital media for accessibility at a conference in Anaheim, California in October. part of the agreement was that you must be prepared to provide a video of your entire talk in the event that we need that to upload to our website, which I'm reading between the lines, that virus comment that you made later in the year.
There's definitely a consideration. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think the big companies, they have a different rule to measure. The big companies don't like to go to big conventions after a while because they find that their announcements get diluted because they're competing against all the other big companies, and they'd rather have their own event. This is what happened with Apple and CES. But the small companies, I think the one thing they really can't capture that they can have at a big event like this is a serendipitous discovery, because a lot of people go to those events and just walk the back aisles to find the little company in Taiwan or somewhere that's doing something that nobody's ever seen before, and you'd never discover them if it weren't for an event like this.
Yeah, but I think that's in a lot of ways that's kind of lightning in a bottle. Like, you don't know whether, I think that John Barker is a good example of someone who is just we know about his product because he puts out content on YouTube. It's, and that kind of push, and Jeffrey does the same thing where he's not making products yet, but and there's a couple folks here that are putting those products out, but we're buying products from John because because we know about his what he does based on his videos, and so that studio approach I think could work for a lot of companies. Next, go ahead, Chris, real quick.
So the other thing that we discussed the other day was the growth of success. Like, you start with that 10 by 10 booth and the 20 by 20, and then you have a medium-sized booth like Frame, and then you have a gargantuan booth like Blackmagic. But the real gangster move is to not show up at all. When you're as big as Apple and you go, we don't really need a booth, we're good.
Yeah.
And that's what you
and
want to
by the way,
encourage
Apple's
people.
There.
They're all over the place. They turn their badges
Everywhere.
over, by the way. But they're all over the place, but they don't have a booth. And
right.
what you want to do is you want to hit strong on the guys like Grant and say, be bigger than NEB. What do you need NEB for?
They just have to get, Blackmagic just has to get better at their video delivery to do that. It's like,
and maybe that's where we could help.
Maybe they don't listen. Anyway, next question.
Sam Greenwood from Toronto asks, building on Jeffrey and Alex's comments about the NFL, which professional sports league do you think does broadcast the best?
Okay, good. Ken?
Yeah, the English Premier League is by far the best because they sell their football rights for $3 billion, is it $2.5 billion?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sold worldwide. That is how sports to be presented. There isn't any better, not in my opinion, than that.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
WWE, hands down. It's they're always on cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
They know what works, what doesn't work, which is why you don't normally see too many 360 videos from them. But they definitely stay on the cutting edge, and they see what works and exploit it as best as possible. What I was talking about with the cutting of the football stuff, actually WWE did before NFL took it over.
Yeah, they have an innovation center down by Ringling in Florida. That's all they do is figure out how to. They have. It's convenient to have a whole bunch of students that are right next to you. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, from a streaming point of view, I think MLB does an amazing job, and they've been doing it for a long time. They have a lot of games, and you can now, on the right device, watch a game from a TV feed and listen to the radio commentary that goes from your local team, and that's amazing.
I think they do a good job. I think from a pure production perspective, my favorite is the NFL, just because. But they also have a game that is built for TV. Be clear that it's evolved. We're not shooting a game. It is a show that has people on the field. In the same way that WWE is in some way that case too. But the way that they stop it, if you're actually at the game, it's a lot more boring because they got the guy with the orange glove that comes out and he stops the things for the commercials and then they do the thing. But a lot of the setup is really, there's a symbiotic relationship between NFL and TV that is much different than I think almost any other sport. But I think both MLB and NFL benefit from pauses. there's lots of gaps to talk about things. It makes it easier to do a show. So like when we do shows around basketball and hockey and soccer, there's everything's happening all the time. And you can't have the same conversations that you can have when you keep on stopping. So next question.
James Babbitt from San Diego. How did the chefs on Mad in the Kitchen arrange to have a smooth dialogue and not talk at the same time?
I think it's mostly in the past. It's been mostly because a lot of them are from here, and we just get used to the kind of the status quo. And at the beginning, it was because we just didn't give them a mic, we didn't open it up. So I think that it's been a mixture of those things. But yeah, it's worked out pretty well as far as that goes. I think it's been a slow progress. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, one thing that certainly helps as well is rehearsal. We were able to point things out during rehearsal. Like last Friday's rehearsal, we were able to point out like, hey, you guys are overlapping too much in certain parts. So just keep that in mind as we do the actual show.
It is one thing to remember is that we are rehearsing those, and that makes a huge difference. We did on the ones we didn't rehearse, it made a huge difference, and not in a good way. Next question.
Carmi Weinswag again from Redondo Beach. Why is it that people still think that science fiction authors predict the future rather than the more accurate design the future? Engineers read science fiction, see the movies, and use them as design specs so they know what to build and how it should work. See Make It So by Nathan Shedroff.
I think it's a bit of both. I think that there's a bit of both of those, that symbiotic relationship between it, because I think that they can see what might be possible there. They create that and people do set into it, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think that they have to, those engineers, they're just kind of interwoven, and people have been making those big predictions for a long time. Go ahead, JJ.
Yeah, you look at Mona Lisa Overdrive. We even yesterday, it was a celebration of Douglas Adams, like the folks who have dreamers. Yep. We dream and we create.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Richard Laverly from Belfast. I'm testing the Cintiq telestrator setup and it all working except the pan calibration is way off by inches. When I try the Wacom calibration, the monitor option is blank when connected to the ATEM. Any thoughts on what it might be missing? The tablet works when it's not routed through the ATEM. Note, using ATEM Extreme ISO and Cintiq 16.
Cintiq. It's a Cintiq. I don't know what you're you should be outputting. You got to make sure it's the whole program. There's no scaling to it, that's applied to it on the way out. I mean, that's usually the thing that gets you, is there's some kind of scale that's been applied to the image. So you might be trying to scale out your interface or something like that. If you scale it at all, it won't work. That's the number one problem we've had with that. Go ahead, Ken. We'll move pretty quickly because we're still.
Yeah, I've experienced that problem when I'm using a Cintiq here, and I'm on my on a really large monitor at the side of it. Then that's what you're saying in terms of the scaling part. It's really, you need to dedicate or make sure that it is set up that the Cintiq is the main display, the main resolution.
Yep, and Cintiq has to go directly. Its HDMI out has to go directly into the ATEM, and you can't go somewhere else. It has to go into it as an input. Next question.
JHB from New York. Which drone or accessory do I need to get the live drone footage into an ATEM Mini? Thank you.
It's anything. It's any controller or any transmitter that has an HDMI out. So there's a couple different usually the smaller ones won't. So I think you need to get to a Phantom or above before you start having devices that will do the transmission. And a lot of them are some of the third-party devices and so on and so forth. But you need to have a transceiver or receiver that has an HDMI out, and you want to look for those. I mean, the Spires I think almost all have them. And usually they're designed to go out to another monitor, but that's an HDMI out from that piece there. Yeah. Next question.
Geert Meiji from Oudevely, Belgium. Has anyone installed the latest Playout B version? The casual tearing issue is gone, and integration with Companion, start, pause, stop, clip, select, works flawlessly.
Jonas has made big steps forward. I've tested it just a little bit, and I haven't been able to find any tearing in clips that I had tearing before. So we may be able to use it for a lot more than what we had in the past. I was using it for or experimenting with it for very low level things, but I think that we're going to keep on seeing it kind of grow in usefulness. in that process. Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't tried it yet, but does he? I talked to him about possibly adding the ability to go to a specific time code or set a in point and an out point. I know he lets you pause now, so you could play it down to a certain point and then pause to take it from some point other than the beginning of the file. But that would be a requirement before I could be able to use it in production, because half the time people send me files that have countdown leader, everything else that you got to cut off on it.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Alex said, JJ asked me to step in. The next question is from Rupert McRae in Dallas. He says, in-person events may open up, but are the high-value exhibitors willing to attend? The Mobile World Congress conference is going ahead this year, but many major brands have said they will not have a physical presence. What makes it worth going to these shows? We've kind of discussed a lot.
I think we have. I think we're kind of, it's going to be a chicken. I think there's just a chain reaction here that we're going to see start tearing itself up, and I think that's going to, and especially if we do see a bump, if we see a bump in the fall, it's over. Like, it'll just break the back of physical events, because it's just, people are so wound up to get back into it. If we don't see a bump, it'll slowly fade out. If we see a bump, we could see, a lot of events never come back. Especially ones that have already scheduled into the October, because you have all these companies that, they've bought hotel rooms, they've built stuff, they're planning it. If they have to pause again and move it, they're just going to get back to, like, this isn't worth it anymore. And it doesn't, again, it's not all of them. They're going to say that 10%, 15%. They're going to say, I don't want to play anymore. And that's going to, so a bump this fall will be the end if it happens. Next question.
Yeah, I think that 15% comment of yours is really strong. Pete from Seattle says, is Zoom OSC and Stream Deck used in the production of office hours?
We are about to. So, a lot of us use Stream Deck on it, but the Zoom OSC, Zoom ISO, all summer, you're going to see it build up into something really complex. So, we're working on it. I've been meeting with Andy every week talking about it. So we're cool. It's going to be fun. Next question.
Gabriel from Milan, Italy says, regarding my previous question, here it is, a picture of how the Mac Mini M1 is connected to the AVIO. And there's a bunch of links to things. Please note the A10 Mini is connected to a USB-A port, and it works well with QuickTime. Only Zoom Rooms doesn't see it. Note, as recommended by Richard Lavery, I connected the AVIO with the USB-C to USB-A cable, and now it does not interfere anymore with display detection. Anyway, the ATEM does not show up, only in ZR. No matter if it is connected to USB-A or USB-C, but my Elgato HD60S Plus is correctly detected by Zoom Rooms. Wow.
That's a crazy problem. Go ahead, Courtney.
One thing we haven't mentioned since the Dante
we'll go pretty quick because we're almost
since the Dante interface is eventually going to be audio video I/O, hence the name AVIO. Maybe it's identifying itself as a video display device to Apple, and Apple only allows two display devices, so it's counting it. And so it only, when you plug it in, it takes up one of the display ports, even though you're only encoding audio.
Right. No, absolutely. It's a tricky one. I think there's something going on with I have to admit, at this point, I'd grind that Mac Mini all the way to the ground. Like, I would just reinstall everything if I was having this much trouble with it, because it should not happen. Like, there's something going on in your system, and I would just start over. Next question.
Excuse me. Douglas Carmichael says that the Small Business Administration created the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant to support independent concert and theater venues hurt by the pandemic. The Korean government is betting big on XR and streaming. Would that money have been better spent on developing platforms like those in the USA?
I think so.
Glass to every place.
These huge venues are incredibly valuable as broadcast centers. They're just not as valuable as people centers. So they could have been doing a lot more than they are. And that's going to be they have a ton of infrastructure, ton of space, all kinds of things that you can do really interesting things with. But they just don't understand that model yet. So we'll see how they do. All right, let's jump in. Sorry, we're running a little late. I didn't do very good time management. I thought we were ahead and then we were behind. So, but we're a little bit more casual, especially when there's not a lot of questions. So if there's more, just so you know, like if there's more than 8 questions about a subject and we're at 7:55, I will close it up, like by 8. If there's less than 8, I'll go, we'll give it 5 or 10 more minutes. In this case, 15. So because it's not pushing that hard. So we're going to talk about fly kits, talk about what it takes to move our stuff, and load in and talk about that process here. And let's go ahead, and because we're starting a little late, let's go ahead and jump into the questions first, and then we'll talk about other things that we want to talk about there. Go ahead, Chris.
Brian Carpenter from Cleveland says, do any of the panelists have their kit control simplified to the point where anyone else in their household uses it? My family gets intimidated and require complete hand-holding to get it all up and running.
Your family is doing production?
Well,
That's
they're
all I gotta
probably
say.
like
Play. Well played.
It's like
Yeah,
your
go.
kids doing school on your
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was just going to say my son helped with Mad in the Kitchen over the weekend, his first. So he'll be doing it again. So yeah, get your family engaged.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that what I will say is, I know we're going a little off the rails there, but there's no reason kids can cut a show at 10, maybe even 9 or 8 or 9. There's no reason why they can't. Like, there's nothing about it that is difficult or hard that they can't figure out. Now, they may not cut great shows at the beginning, but none of us do. So the key is to get them involved early, get them doing production, because by the time they're 18, they'll be where you were when you were 28, and possibly even more, because they may work on a lot more shows. They've got kid time, not adult time, which is like 10 times more than adult time, because A, their brain is going 5 times faster, and B, there's just twice as much time. We waste a lot of time. No, I'm not going to say that on YouTube, but the current structure that kids are in right now takes the most valuable time of their life and wastes it on stuff that they're never going to use. John?
I sat my son down on my old TriCaster. He learned it within a weekend. He figured out DMX. He went on YouTube and learned about DMX, so he was able to control all our DMX lights in our studio. He's amazing. I just throw him a problem and he figures it out.
He's also a grown man, John.
He is now. His first computer was an SGI Indy back 30 years ago.
That's great. Yeah, you look at what your kids do on games. It's incredibly complex. Oftentimes more complex than anything we're doing with cameras and switchers and audio and everything else. They're building these very complex systems, and they understand them in incredible amount of detail, and they know that by the time they're 10 or 11 years old. So there's just a lot of opportunity there for them to learn and do that. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I feel sorry for my grandson. He's 6 years old. He loves Minecraft, and he can't get anybody in the family, including myself, to care even slightly. The other day, he comes running out and he plops down on my wife's lap, and he's like, "Nana, why don't we go inside and we can play Minecraft together?" And she's like, "I don't get it." And he's so immersed in this world of whatever it is.
Right.
To me, it just looks like animated Legos, but
yeah,
it's weird.
Next question.
Next question is from Aaron Cincarella in Flagstaff, Arizona. I apologize. What's your favorite case to use for a fly kit?
A rack. So that's the one thing I'll say with the fly kit, is that you really want to think about how you're going to put this together and how it's going to load in relatively painlessly. That's the big thing is you want to have as much stacked up. Here, let me show you a couple photos here. Let's see if I can find.
It's funny you read case as a box. I thought of case as a use case.
Oh,
I think you're probably right. But
oh, well, let's see here. I think it's to use for it. It's, I think the to use, I think, is the, but this is, let me see if I can.
While you're clicking, I'm just going to say,
click.
in the mid 80s, One Pass Video in San Francisco, I believe, is the company that popularized the idea of what they called a fly pack. And it was sort of like a branded name that they had. And some of the companies in the 80s, when the equipment was bigger, there were some companies that had their very own containers, that curved belly container in a plane, and they would load it at their place and run it over to the airport.
No, absolutely. So here's a fly pack. This is probably from, I don't know, this is almost 8 years ago, I think. And but this gives you a sense. So here's what you see here is that's our ClearComm matrix, along with some little Meraki's, a lot of elementals to stream a lot of different things. And then, frame converters, recording. These were the truck end of fiber inputs. But the key is all of this is all wired together, so that we don't have to do that on site. Like, that's been all tested and figured out. We know how to, there's only a handful of things that go between these cases. And then you'll notice that these cases this is one of the front plates of that case that's Brian from the back, that Brian is at, to do that. Now let's see if there's a slightly wider one. So there's a little QL1. You'll see this is from Dreamforce, I think, and then this is just the top end of one. So you'll see there's another case down there, but all of the stuff kind of comes out in pieces. There you can see there's Nate. So this is Smithsonian. It's a lot of, hold on, sorry. This is a general production thing I grabbed onto there. But you can see, here's another one. Again, these are when you have load-in issues. This is in the White House. This is what you should never do, by the way, we learned, this one survived, but putting this many together was a heat problem. But we have to load in. We had hours to load in to a whole production. And so that becomes, speed at which you can, get a lot of this stuff done, becomes kind of the challenge. And now here's another way to think about this is we've built these out in sections of what we need. And then because we're not, we didn't have a way to load in. And so this is another way to do this where the different groups are there. And it's a little bit more modular of a setup, as you go through that. And then this is kind of the ultimate, fly kit, which is a little trailer. So you can see, all of the, monitoring and everything else and tables, and you just drive up and make it go. So anyway, that's some of the stuff there. Anyway, let's see. Let me pull this back out again.
Could you take your trailer into the basement of Moscone?
We could. We never did. It was just it takes up too much. It was just the way that the space was organized. We really wanted to, because then it was more secure and it was all set up the way we wanted to, and we didn't have to, pay as much for people to connect things and everything else, because it would just be like, just plug these things in, like it'd be like 8 inputs and then we're done. And so we definitely we suggested it. It will definitely roll into the Moscone or any other convention centers. But usually people wanted to have us build it on tables. You have to kind of know what you're building into. Go ahead, John.
I moved to the Gator cases, the Plastic Pro ones, which is this one here. This is audio. This is 8U. Mm-hmm. And this one has the handle and the wheels on it. Right. And when I first received it, like a forklift busted the handle. They sent me a whole complete unit to replace just the handle. They're like, have a nice day. So I have one for audio, all my audio gear, X32, right, and Shure Accent receivers, and then my video case is right below that.
Yeah, and it this is definitely something that kind of evolves as you build it out. This is another one that's old here, and then we'll jump into some more questions here. But this is like, here's the one case this is in Williams-Sonoma, I think. And there's Colleen. She was at the time she was spending a little time working with us, and so then all of this stuff has to kind of get built out for a lot of those. This is a very small fly kit in Rwanda, so it's a very tiny one as far as putting those things together. That's the behind the scenes of that. Here's like just building it out inside of a space. Now this is in our control room in DC. This is us building inside of this. Look at all these tape decks. Let's see if I can find another one. This is kind of again something you can just kind of roll in and run fairly lightly. This is 8 fly kits run by a team of 26 people because we ran it all remotely from a studio. This is when fly kits start to get pretty big. This is Salesforce 2014 is probably the same one that you saw before. There, yeah. And so there's kind of when you open it up, these are all the cases that we brought in. And again, we kind of figure out how they all have to interrelate to each other before we start. Now, in this case, Brian actually from this console ran all of our stream audio from 8 different rooms. And so they're all fed in from other computers, but he remote controlled, all of the rooms from all the different locations. And so anyway, this is that's a shot there. You saw those. So anyway, a couple more ideas around fly kits. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you're not doing massive installations like Alex is, and the one question I have for Alex, you call them fly kits, but they have to be shipped by truck or by air freight. You cannot fly with them as
we have flown with them. I mean, you can fly the smaller ones that you saw that are modular like that. Yeah. Those we fly with, and we fly with. I think our record is 42 cases. And when you think about 42 cases, we flew 1 ton, a proper ton, overnight from San Francisco to Japan for about $1,300. so
what year was that in?
That would have been 2014. Okay. Something like that. It's because we're utilizing the Media Pass in United, and so we're paying $70 a bag. But if you're a Premier, if you have a Premier status, you get 3 free bags under 70, and every person on your ticket gets 2 more. So we would get to like 13, 14 of those bags are free, and then the heavy ones we would push over into that. We pay $70 a bag up to 100 pounds. So you just have to figure out all the math, and you can get an enormous amount of weight. Into an actual fly kit that's actually going into there. But once you start using trucks, though, you get your back starts going, hey, why don't we just use Rocket? we don't have to do this anymore. You're just like, why are we doing this? And cases start to become pretty painful when you start to go down that path. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Tommy in St. Paul, Minnesota. He says, what do you use for redundancy for a broken Ethernet connector?
I'm assuming it's just a broken Ethernet connection. For us, we request, when we go to a venue, we request diverse paths through the venue and diverse connections in the venue. So we actually make requests. Now, sometimes we don't always get it, and sometimes they just say, oh, yeah, it's diverse, and it's not. We can check it by running the trace route, but you get as much as you can. But usually what we wanted to do is we wanted to come out of our kit and go 2 different directions, and they just go off. And that means if a forklift runs over it, that's that number one thing that kills your connections are forklifts. But if someone cuts it, someone closes the door on your fiber in North Carolina, not that I'm bitter, those kinds of things, you have another connection that didn't go through the same space, isn't in the same location. Inside of that, we have usually we have Meraki's that are set to fail over. So if they fail, that they have there's another route out. I mean, so for general Ethernet connection, that's kind of what we have, multiple of everything that we can think of. There's a term that we have as a SPOF, a single point of failure. So we usually know where all the SPOFs are. You can't build a kit without any SPOFs, but we do know, we'll point out where the SPOFs are, in our production, and then we get really careful about those SPOFs. Like making sure that it's brand new, and if there's any issue with it, and it's all in perfect condition because it's a SPOF. Next question.
Frojan Banuel from San Diego says, the M1X Mac Mini reported to be thinner and have magnetic power connector. Would this power connector be problematic with using Mac Minis in a streaming setup?
Yeah, you'd want to have something that'll lock it in, definitely. Like if it doesn't have a battery in it, as you all know, I love the mag connector. like for my laptop, I am in love with it. But you'd have to have a battery. Like if you don't have a battery and you have something that can pull out really easily, that's kind of scary. It means you reach in for something and you unplug it. So my only hope would be that if they did that, there's some locking mechanism to it that you can tap it in and then lock it into place. And if not, someone's going to build one. Like someone will build some version of that case that has like an ectoskeleton that has a little thing that you slide down and push in or something to protect that. Go ahead, Ken.
If it's anything like the new M1 iMacs, once that magnet goes in, it isn't you would, if it was a normal plug, you would pull the monitor off the table before that. You know, it's a very,
it's
very
pretty
strong magnet. Yeah.
So you have the
it's
new iMac?
Really strong. Yes, I've got.
And do you like it?
I don't use it because I have my my XDR. So it's my wife Helen. She's but it is nice. It is. Yeah. It is a beautiful looking thing. It really sits well in her office.
What color? Have to ask.
She got blue. Blue.
Nice. Go ahead, John.
John Prosser showed off this render from supposed schematics on this new Mac Mini. Yeah. But Alex, don't you mount those in a case anyways, and then you'd run that power into a UPS, not a UPS, but a panel.
I think that in our cases that would probably be okay, but it would still worry me that you'd reach into it. What I would end up doing is either taping or affixing the power cable to the case, to make sure that it doesn't pop out. But that would be the thing that I would be most concerned about. Yeah, there's a little content guard. Yeah.
This is a thing that OWC makes where you can lock a power cable, or actually I think other types of, this is for a Thunderbolt, where on some of their devices, there's actually a screw hole right above the port. Mm-hmm. They call it a Klingon.
Next question.
Tommy says, how has your kit changed since the Blackmagic Design A10 Mini was released?
Well, I haven't had to go on the road, for that. The kind of things that I do fly kits for, I would still probably be using SDI-based stuff because we just need a lot of routing. That's the big thing for us, is that the big thing that changes your life is when you put a 40x40 router in. It is life-changing in a fly kit. A lot of people go in there and they'll show up with their switchers and they have 6 aux outs, or even with a Constellation 24. But what you want is just this distro that's not connected to your show, that you can just go, oh, I need 4 more monitors, or I need this, or I need to route this, or I need to route that. The next thing you start building after the router is you realize, oh, I still don't have enough routing, and then you start using patch panels. And so those we use Bittree 12K patch panels. And once you have those patch panels, now you can manually route for that show, and there's no, you're really maximizing the router. And then you literally can't have enough outputs from your router. Like, no matter how many router connections you get, you'll just use them all up but what it does is it increases how smooth your production runs. So, a lot of our larger ones will have, 72x72s, and then we might have service ones. We've had ones where we have multiple 40x40s and then some 72x72s. And the reason we do that also is a little bit of redundancy. So if one goes down, the other one still has a bunch of the signals and can keep running. And that's where a patch panel becomes useful as well, because you can physically patch from one router to another. You can take all the inputs that were going into one router and patch them with cables into the other router. And so that means that you can move it. Now we're very conservative and old fashioned in the sense that we don't do anything that is half normaled or normaled, which means that there's a video signal running through it unless you patch it. We want to patch everything, because that way we know what's going in and out. And the reason you do that when you're streaming is you're doing really high quality, a big deal event. You'd rather see black than the wrong signal. So you don't want to have, because we've had things where people pull something out and it immediately shows something that they shouldn't have, and that's the thing that keeps us up at night. And then the pins that we put in that go out to the world, we have these red pins, and you put those in, and that means that you're out to the world. You pull those out, and there's nothing leaving the building, and you can just see it, and it's physical, and it's an air gap, and we find that to be useful. Next question.
Also from Tommy, he says, "Let's see the back of those racks, Alex."
Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Yeah, I probably have.
Does Courtney have any Jeopardy music or game show music while Alex is looking through his? Come on, Courtney.
Random. Let's see if I have.
He's looking.
Look at him. Yeah, he's looking.
I didn't boot that tablet up this morning.
Yeah. A lot of times we're taking. I do admit that a lot of times we're taking the pictures of the front of those and not necessarily the back of them. So I'm just trying to see if I have any that are easily accessible that show the back ones. The big thing with the back of these is I can show you how not to do it. Hold on. Let me show you. This is what happened before we evolved. This is probably the last one we did this with. This is not a good example. So this is like the worst idea. So this is in the back of a truck, We did load them into a van. We loaded this into a van. Let's see if we were doing, this was Mariano Andretti's car, but we were doing wireless at Sonoma Raceway. And this is exactly what you do not do. Like, we did this in the early days, and I think actually someone stepped on one of these cables, not on this one, but like on an event a week later. This is, I don't know, 8 years ago. And it became, instead of a 40 by 40, it was a 40 by 39. So that's why you don't do it this way. You'll start to see us, we were already going down this path of where what you want is convenience panels down here that are, what you should be doing is, and this was that, but we just stopped putting, when the new routers came out, we stopped doing this. But what you want is no one touches any of this stuff and it's not exposed. You have all of it here. And I think the reason we had this back here stuck out was because we were in a really hot location, and we needed it was easier to put the fins on the outside. Turned out to be a big deal for the Blackmagics, but that's a big mess. If I can find one that's newer, I'll show it to you. That's a lot more organized, because we slowly learned that was, what we were doing there was kooky and not efficient, and we'd break equipment. I'm just trying to see if I just can't seem to find any backs. But a lot of times what we get into is well-labeled convenience panels, that have, and the nice thing is they have tape across them, you can write what's on them, and then you just connect things to them. And if you break something, someone steps on something, someone grabs onto it, it pops out, and it costs you $20 instead of thousands to fix it. So, but I'll see if I can find some more behind. Let's go to the next question while I keep looking.
Matt from Montreal says, when you say fly kits, do you mean to travel in an aircraft or to move in a truck to a venue?
I mean, typically people, I think, they're pretty loose about the definition of fly kits, in the sense that they mostly refer to it as, something that comes in a truck. You can fly with almost anything. Like all the cases that I showed you, we have flown with. Sometimes it costs a lot of money to fly with them. So one of the keys is, if you want a fly kit to be truly a fly kit, don't make it more than 50. We make it 52 inches. I think the real limit is 55 inches. The cost of moving that case goes up like literally 50 to 100% if that case is more than, I believe it's 55 inches, because of the way it has to be handled at the airline. So it fits into the case at 55, or lower, it fits into a case that it doesn't anymore. And now it's really expensive to move. So you learn to kind of build your fly kits if you're really going to fly with them at a smaller height. And there's dimensions you want to work inside of. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I was just going to mention for regular baggage, I think it's like 63 inches length, width, height. And then 55 is like, are you saying is the max, in one dimension essentially?
In the height, it's been, we have, the reason that we know that in such detail is because we were working with Rocket, and we asked why our rates were so high, and it was explained to us as that height limit is a big issue there. This, by the way, let me show you. The other thing you get into is figuring out what you should do with a fly kit and what you shouldn't. This is let me see if I can show this here. This is in Germany. This is a small fly kit. So these are some more of these little SKBs. And again, we have to move them all in so that they're all, and this is another thing that SKB makes, these open racks. And what they found was people wanted the shock racks, but they just wanted the internal part of the shock rack. So it goes into a case that has a shock rack, but it just pulls out, and you get a lot more air, in that area as well. So here you can see kind of there's a lot of the people that you've seen here before. There's Brent By, and there's Kevin Maurer, and this is all in Berlin. And there's a control for the PTZs. And so we brought the PTZs, we bring the controllers, we brought everything here. And then, of course, we rented the lights from Ambien, and all the big hardware we rented. So you kind of decide what you're going to bring and what you're going to what you're going to rent. You don't rent things that you don't like tripods. You don't fly with tripods. But getting telestrators, for instance, is really difficult. But there's kind of the build. And this is for the last German elections, the activation there. So anyway. But again, what you want to think about with that fly kit is what is durable and probably won't break down and is easily replaceable. You rent that locally, and then you bring the things that make you different with you. So the stuff that kit pre-built and tested in our office means that we can load in one day and be shooting the next day, and we know it's going to work. Next question.
Moving right along, Noah from Fullerton says, "Could I show my flight kits and get feedback?"
Yeah. Let's make Noah a co-host.
Do it now. Oh,
actually, I should be able to just use my camera if you want to use it that way. Oh, of course, I opened Discord right here. Yeah, so I kind of have two levels of flight kits based off of Alex's description. So I have something that I would fly with actually, and then this bigger one fits in a trailer. So I guess I could start with the smaller one since it's smaller and more convenient. So I have 4 audio channels wireless that come through a diversity pair of antennas that have a antenna distribution in the back. I'm using an LiveTrack L8 mixer on the other side. I'll show you this picture here. You'll see the audio mixer here, but yeah, going back to the patch, we have 2 inputs for XLR. So if you have a larger mixer, you could plug that in. We have a left and right stereo output for, PA system if we need it. I use these as for monitors, so I could do a return with a mix minus to a headset for talent. This is a double-sided power unit, and then this is a Keystone patch panel where you could individually put in different types of connectors like SDI, BNC, or HDMI, what have you. So
that's cool.
But I found it super helpful. And my computer's freezing up on me.
Computer's not happy.
Doing too many things at once there. But yeah, so that's kind of my current setup on my fly kit. And let me try to reset this program. But any thoughts so far on that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
I really like the double-sided use of that rack. Very efficient. Although there was on one of the patch panels, there were 2 power cables coming out of one of the blank slots. I would probably put some edge guard around the sharp metal there, just to protect those power cables, just in case.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They get pulled up against it. It's a really nice and efficient. I think that the hard part is also like thinking about it does that fly. Usually a fly kit, when I bring it in, I want to know that it's running. Again, I've said this over and over again. Everything runs at about 40% capacity. So when I bring a fly kit in, oftentimes I want to know that I can stretch by 60%. Based on whatever is needed in the location, and that seems like overkill most of the time. But it's usually why we kind of load in heavy, for that process. So that would be that kit being really small. I'd always worry about, can I do everything? And you find that you can do what you need to in that process pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the thing that I was trying to get to is the thought of like having it all in one box for the smaller projects, where it's one-man band type stuff, and it's just me trying to get stuff done. But so then when you have
a lot of times I try to separate audio and video. So I try to have a box for each, because a lot of times if I'm going to go through the trouble of building it, I want to know that it stacks on top of each other in a way that I can just immediately run it. Like one person could run that, but B, if I needed to flip it out, like if I needed to go to 2 people, have one person managing audio and one person managing video, I can just split those cases and make it work. The other thing is that I haven't needed to take the Extreme out or an A10 Mini. The one thing I don't like is the control surface being connected. The reason I like the panel and the X Touch that I use with the X32 is that when I'm setting up, I only have 2 Ethernet cables to plug into the kit. So the kit is all self-wired with all the video and audio distribution, and then I'm just plugging some Ethernet controllers into it. And I try to keep the signal, other than going to cameras and microphones, I try to keep the signal as condensed inside the box as possible, because every time we start to externalize that becomes more challenging. There's just more room for things not to work. But it's good.
Yeah,
it's a really
absolutely
really good box.
Thanks. Yeah, and then I would basically just stick some laptops on. I have a piece of wood I cut out that fits it perfectly. So I have my 2 encoders on top, and then I just upgraded to the Extreme ISO for the primary switcher as well.
Great.
So
I bet you can do a pretty complicated shoot that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy how much I was able to fit in there, surprisingly. And then, for the more complex stuff, we would use, the full kit. So I think I mentioned this a couple streams ago, but I basically built these rack units from the ground up.
That's great.
Because I didn't want to purchase my own set, and so this is like Gen 2 of the build. So we have an Allen and Heath QU16. We had the Blackmagic switcher, which I've upgraded to the 2ME, and 2 encoders on the left, and then a 55-inch TV, which folds up from the top.
That's great.
So yeah,
that's fantastic.
All on wheels. And it's been a passion project that I've been working on, but haven't told many people about yet because it's still so new. But absolutely, so kind of fun.
Yeah, and it's and the hard part with these is like, how do you roll? I guess you roll them out of a truck.
Yes, yeah. Actually, let me show you that too. So here we are. Yeah, come down. Yeah, so this is my trailer, and so it's a toy hauler, and it folds flat in the back. I built an extra ramp here as well, so both carts will fit in here. I actually have a room for a third cart if I really wanted to.
Right.
But yeah, that's so great. Both carts, will roll right in, and I'm in Orange County, but I'll go wherever the job's needed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool setup.
So thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me show it.
It's way more imaginative. You've got the, like ours are just like, I just call down and have somebody build a case for me. So we almost, before we closed Pixel Core, we were literally inches away from getting a shop bot. That's when you really start because then you just shop bots they're a router, CNC router for up to sheets of wood up to 4 feet by 8 feet. So you can just drop your particle board in, and we got into a conversation with someone at I think CT. They have all these boxes, all these cases, these big cable cases, and so on and so forth. And there's almost no metal. And I was like, and it's really finely, interwoven wood. And I said, that must seem like a lot of work just to put these together. Oh, no, you just print them. I was like, print them? Like, how do you print them? And like, shop bot.
Is it supposed to be like lighter weight? Sorry to interrupt you.
It's not lighter weight.
Like metal, or
it's just cheaper, and so what happens is that you just throw the wood in and hit print, and then you throw a bunch of glue on it and you slap them together, and then you sand it all off and round it or whatever. And it's I guess it's more durable in some cases. It does less damage to the way it's set up. It does less damage to the hallways and stuff like that because it's rounded in. It doesn't have the big. And but it's just cheaper. There's a lot less metal to buy, so you're just buying raw wood. Now it's not because wood's really expensive, but it was a lot cheaper to throw wood at things rather than buying the specialty metal. You'd have to have a lock and the wheels and the hinges, and that was kind of it. Everything else is wood, and the shop bot it's just sitting there cutting away, and it sounded like it was cutting 24/7, just constantly. There's a long queue of things that need to get made, and it just goes through the system, and it's a really interesting process. Next
ShopBot's a CNC router, not really a printer or anything, right?
Yeah, no, they just call it printing, but it's a CNC router for wood, big pieces of wood. Next question.
Gordon Lake from Los Angeles says, what would be a good solution to powering a fly kit other than house power, or a generator from the street?
I just had this picture of these horses outside going around in circles, just walking around in circles.
Galloping. Galloping on a treadmill.
Yeah. We got to start streaming, so we got to get those horses going faster. Like move those carrots faster. There's a TikTok in there somewhere. Anyway. Yeah, exactly. There's different layers of it. Number one is that we, again, for a big event, we usually have a generator, as well as what we call shore power. The house power is usually how we refer to it as shore power. And then we usually want a generator as a back end. And then we have UPSs. And so we kept ours small enough before we went to a truck that we would always have these Liebert UPSs that were conditioning our power as well as providing enough. We had enough of them in our truck, in our little trailer, we could run it for 20 minutes on the Lieberts. And that's because we have a smaller kit and because it's set up that way. And then we still give it primary backup. And then at that point, you're I don't think we ever had a problem where we ran out of power in those areas. Now, we put our own distro into our, so we added a lot. So we had a 3-phase 100 amp distro inside the trailer. So what was great about that is you'd get the cam locks in, you'd be able to plug all the power coming from the shore, a full 3-phase in, and then distribute it out. We would actually distribute it from our system out to the satellite truck and everything else. That way we understand. If you haven't noticed, we're a little bit of a control. I'm a little bit of a control personality. So it's, yeah. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I also have UPSs that are rack mounted in the bigger racks, which help with power as well. I wouldn't necessarily power a show off of it, but it's in case there's an outage or what have you. And then a Honda generator, the 2200 one you mentioned as well.
2200 one works great. Anything we need more of, we rent. So the 2200 is as big as we would buy. We owned one. We own a couple of them, and if we're going to need more power than that, we rent them because they're just not that expensive to rent. You can get sun power to show up with something that's a lot of power, and for hundreds of dollars a day. So it wasn't worth doing that. And if you have a bigger kit, you have a bigger budget theoretically, so you can rent a power. Next question.
Chris Taylor from Winter Park, Florida says, Alex, can you describe the contents of the kits that you send out to remote presenters?
Yeah, we have 2 kits. We had a lot of different kits, and now we're down to 2. And they're neither, so there's only 2 options at the moment for us. And one is the small option. And the small option is a Mac Mini with a Mix Pre 3 with noise assist, with a Countryman or DPA headset mic, and a auto. Actually, I think we're moving. Well, right now they're auto, but we're moving to audio implement IFBs. And so that's what we. That's the base, and then we're using the Pavo tubes. They're a little challenging with people with glasses. We're finding, so those become a thing. For us, I think we still need to find some ways to diffuse those a little bit better. And so with a little tripod, and then the small kit has a Brio that we can control and move around, which is useful. The bigger kit comes with a teleprompter on a larger. It's a Benro, kind of heavy tripod. We use a 6K, and of course we then still have the what we add there is a Mac Mini with we have a Meraki that we have in there to build the VPN connection, and then we have an ATEM Mini to run the camera, and then of course the Mix Pre with the headset, and then we use 68Bs, Nanlite 68Bs for the lighting, and that's pretty much the mix there. Those are the 2 kits that we send out, and one, so they're very different and they're complicated. so they're I wouldn't say that they're like you pull it up and it just works. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Hosmoke. We'll move pretty quickly because I have a very hard out at 9.
On the mini kit, you didn't mention a monitor. Do you just run them headless without a monitor, or do you depend on the people to have a TV?
We send a monitor. I just forgot.
Okay.
Yeah, so we send a monitor out in most cases there. So unless we know that they have a monitor to work with. Go ahead, Hosma.
You mentioned power tubes. How do you suggest they use them on either side?
Yeah, so we were using them on either side. I think what we're going to do is we're going to start working on a way to build a barn door and put them across like this. They're working better up high and across, but I got to figure out when you send them. What's nice about the Pavo tubes is that they're just easy to set up on people's desks. The downside of it a little bit is that even though I, for some reason, didn't have as much trouble with my glasses, we have other people that we see lines and stuff like that we're trying to work out. But they're way better than a lot of the other options that we had before. They put out a lot of power. I think the thing that I want to figure out is a foldable thing that I can screw to the top and bottom and open it up to just create a larger source, because they've got. Generally, the Pavo tubes could afford to have a lot of diffusion because they are incredibly powerful. We have them turned down typically to like 10%, or less.
I'm going shopping tomorrow because I just checked on our website. There's a local availability of power tubes. So
yeah, I really like them for travel. I think that the standard kit that we're going to move towards is 2 for the subject and then 2 in the background, so that we have color that we can put up as needed. Just hoping that the software gets better so that we can control it remotely. That's the only bummer. We're trying to get to the bigger kits the next version of the bigger kits will all be DMX with, ArtNet and Streamweaver and that kind of thing to let us color and control the lights remotely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, how do you handle transport issues? Do you usually work with the cargo container airline yourself, or have you used a freight forwarder like Rocket Cargo or Sound Moves?
All of the above. We've done everything from, checking. We for a long time we checked gear, a lot of gear, and so we're pretty good at checking large amounts of gear out, and so we've definitely done that using a press pass advantage with like United, and United's got the best policy, so we use it a lot. When we get to bigger cases, then we move to Rocket. Like that's and I would love to say we use something else, but we just never found anybody else to be as precise. So when Rocket says it's going to get somewhere in the world, it'll get there within plus or minus 5 minutes. Like yeah. I mean, like we were in Davos for World Economic Forum, and we had a 4 o'clock drop off that had started 6 days ahead of time before or whatever from our office. It was snowing. It had snowed 3 feet in like 2 or 3 days, and the construction crew was behind because of all the snow. And they're like, well, everyone's behind. And I'm like, they're not going to be behind. You're going to need to be ready. I need a ramp, because Rocket will be on time. 3:59. Tractor trailer shows up, and they roll the stuff off. And the construction crew
do that? Are they like paying off people at borders? Or?
They just get off. They do what I do. I'm on time almost every meeting with my clients because I show up really early. So if I have a meeting in the city, it usually means I'm on a phone call a block away for 45 minutes with somebody working on something else because I'm going to be there 45 minutes early. And then I just show up 5 minutes before. So only if every once in a while I get caught really hard in traffic. I'll get caught like once a quarter where I'm a little late by 5 or 10 minutes. But generally, the way you're on time is that you get within a block, or two, and then it's easier to time when you're only a block or two away than it is when you're 2 hours away or an hour and a half. So that's how you do it. But anyway, they just manage it's managing everybody's expectations. That's why they're on time. They just tell you it's 6 days. It might be 5 days, or 4 days, but they can have a whole bunch of problems happen and still be on time. It's not a matter of them getting there fast. It's getting when they said they were going to get there, and they manage that really well. DHL, on the other hand, we had one in Berlin and it showed up in Stuttgart. Like it was like I'm not kidding. Like they sent it to the wrong city. So we just barely got the show off the ground. All right. Not that I'm bitter. Next question.
Stuart says, shipping, wouldn't it be cheaper to just book the airline's cargo container and load it yourself rather than check in all these cases?
There's a lot of red tape to do that. And it's not cheaper. It's interesting. We have a United counter to counter, and it's cheaper to check the bags than to put it into counter to counter. We still do it. So we've definitely done ones where counter to counter works great, but then you have to show up in the right place with a big truck to pick things up. When you check it, you can just get on whatever van or whatever shows up to pick you up. Like you don't have to go to the cargo area to pick it up with a proper truck with all the right tags and all the other things. And so counter to counter becomes a more complicated. The cargo method is good if you're doing it all the time, not good if you're just doing it once in a while. Go ahead, Courtney.
And it's only good if you're flying on the same airline that flies the same equipment on all their routes, because airlines have a tendency to downsize to a smaller plane at the last minute for a certain flight. And if your cargo container doesn't fit in the belly of that plane, sorry, you can't go out till tomorrow.
Yeah. You're in a much different class as a passenger. You have a higher right, not higher right, but a higher priority in what goes on the plane. So that's why the cargo is just there to fill the rest of the space so that they can make more money per gallon. Next question. Last question.
Douglas Carmichael says, most smaller club class venues I've seen have 24 channel consoles with 24 faders. I've evaluated the Allen and Heath SQ5, fell in love. The 5 fits in my space at home more easily. Would I get more versatility and flexibility out of the 6 with 24 faders?
Yes. I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
More faders? Yes.
More faders.
Solved.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, more faders is always nice because you can have hands-on control right at your fingertips on more channels. I would probably hit up Chris Russo and Tim Holm because I believe they have those mixers and they can probably talk more about it.
That's great. All right, there we go. A good little day of discussion. We're very, very close. So either tomorrow or Friday we'll start streaming directly. So we'll. It's Kevin had some stuff that he was pretty busy with that he had to get done, but we're just about there. So so we'll see how that goes. It could be a little rough this week, and then again, as I said, Nate's cutting next week as we get ready for the week of June 7th. So so we're going to be tightening that solution. So be ready for a little bit of a ride as we figure this out. There's going to be a couple for the first couple that'll be like, oh right, I didn't think of that. So we'll kind of start turning that corner, and then it's just going to get more and more complex. I am putting out tomorrow, keep your eye out for it, a call if people are interested in participating in production crews and process and second hour planning and all that stuff. I meant to put it out this morning. I forgot. So we built a little questionnaire for folks. And so if you're interested in that, we're going to put it out in the email tomorrow. All right, everybody, we're going to now jump into the tomorrow we're doing Ruthless Reviews. Just want to remind you that we're doing those. And the reason I told you that and reminded you is because I'm stretching, because I forgot to open up the way to get into the next one. So now I'm just talking to try to make up for it. But now I'm here. Anyway, so we'll jump into the post show, and we'll see you all, some of you there